Welcome to Carrickfergus Vineyard, a place of hope where lives are changing. We're a church in the heart of Carrickfergus, passionate about seeing people's lives changed by the love of Jesus. The following message was given at one of our Sunday services.
Good morning. Morning, everyone. Ooh, nearly fell. Thank you. Good morning. It's so lovely to see you. My name is Chantel, as been said, and this morning we're continuing our series on relationship goals. And it was so lovely to be together last week. We've got a wee photo here. Last week we were continuing our series on relationships and looking at our friendships in our family gathering. And a big thank you to everyone who runs that, Laura, Marty and all the team. It was so fun. And I love Marty's story about how someone a lot younger than him encouraged him in such a profound way when he was going through a tough time, and they blessed him without knowing that he was going through that time, and that little person was also having a difficult time. So it's a lovely relationship goal, isn't it? Family and friendship across the generations. So I was just wondering if any of you remembered the memory verse from last week. If I put up my other pictures, it would give it away. The allotment group is not allowed to answer because I heard you discuss this on Thursday night. Memory verse, anyone? Yes, well done, Sharon. A friend loves at all times. Proverbs. Well done, Corinne. I'm hoping the kids do better than you lot on the memory verse. That's all I'm saying. You need to brush up a bit there. But it was a precious time and so good to be together as the church family. Now, I might not be very popular for this next picture, and also it will also reveal something about my over-interest in celebrities. Who is missing from this picture? Can anyone tell me? Who's missing though? Who's missing? Yes, okay. David and Victoria Beckham have 4 children, but their eldest, Brooklyn, is missing from this picture in David's 50th celebrations because apparently they're having a family feud. Much is being speculated about the cause of this, which I am following avidly in my news app to my shame, and I apologise for adding to the gossip by drawing it to your attention in church. But anyway, families. How many times have we said families? What about these guys? William and Harry? Surely you've all heard about them. There's a lot of opinions about the royal family. There's a lot of opinions about what's going on, the family dynamics. Are they having a feud? There's a lot of interest in famous families and their dynamics, aren't they? Has anyone seen this show on TV? Who do you think you are? So it's on the BBC, and it's basically some famous people on the show, and they research their ancestors. So this is this year's lineup of the celebrities who did that. I'm not going to name them all because actually I don't know who some of them are, and I didn't research that one. But Paul and I happened to catch one of the episodes, and it can be so moving when they find out things about their ancestors that they had no idea about. It can be good and bad. Sometimes they can find out these really heroic things their ancestors did, and sometimes some very shameful things. And there's also this program, What About Long Lost Family? Has anyone watched that? So this is when people who have been adopted get help to find out their family history and their story, and often they're reunited with parents and siblings that they've never known before. And it will not surprise any of you to know that tissues are required pretty much every time we watch this programme in our house, and the tissues are not just for me, by the way. Paul gets emotional too, don't you? So in recent years, there's been such a surge of interest in all of this, understanding our stories, our connections. There's organisations that can help you trace your genealogy and your ancestry that have become popular. So maybe some of you have heard of this one. It's called Ancestry. Only say if you want to. It's just interested. Has anyone done this kind of thing? Like, oh yeah, a few people have traced their family tree. So interesting. I was at my mum and dad's house yesterday, and I remembered that my dad had when my grandparents had their 50th wedding anniversary, he had made up these books for them with loads of their story and photos, so I got them off him. So I'm going to be poring over that, and it's so good to record that. But when I was looking at the Ancestry website, I found it so interesting. So it said things like, a family tree ties your history together over time. Our 60 billion records are the key to making discoveries. Where your ancestors were born, then your ancestors become more than a name. You can make yourself a detailed timeline called a life story. And it talks about the context of the events that your ancestors were born in. And that did make me think a bit briefly about our family. Like, my dad was born in November 1945, so basically at the end of World War II. And how might that have shaped him, growing up in the post-war era? And as has been mentioned today, I was born on the 26th of May 1975, so now you can work out which number is before the zero, not that it wasn't obvious. But that is obviously the middle of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. How might that have shaped my story, my family's story, many of your stories as well who grew up in this country? And on the website it said, it's easy to get started, have a free trial. But I thought I better not go there or I'll never get this talk written, so maybe sometime. But if you were to look at your family's history and story, and some of you have already done that, which I'd love to chat to you about, it could reveal both amazing things and devastating things, as some of the celebrities found out on Who Do You Think You Are. So nowadays, with the internet and all those things we can research, information has never been so easy to find. But when we find that information, what do we actually do with it? And I was so struck when I read this in a book I've been reading at the moment called Good and Beautiful and Kind by Rich Villodas. So it's super challenging. He says, the truth is that we can know all there is about our DNA, but still not internally navigate our deepest interior stories. Yet we must do this if we are to live as healthy agents of change in the world, refusing to lie or ignore the truth about our journeys. And we've talked about that already in this series in relationship goals. We've talked about exploring the iceberg, going under the surface. We've talked about the stories we tell ourselves, what expectations we have of other people, what assumptions we make about other people that may not be true. And many of these things actually happen and are deeply formed in our family of origin. But in this book, Rich is also careful to point out, and he quotes a famous book called The Body Keeps the Score. He says, it takes enormous courage and trust to allow yourself to remember. And when we're talking about all these things, when we're talking about family, we really need patient and healing spaces, and we really need to be careful and kind to one another. And we really want this church and in our life groups and our friendships and our family, church family, to be these safe places as we open up these parts of our lives to God and one another. And I know some of our life groups are kind of following our Sunday series and chatting about this stuff. And honestly, in the 2 weeks my life group has been going, I have been blown away by people sharing people's honesty, how we're opening up and really encouraging each other. So that is such a beautiful thing and a safe place, which I'm so grateful for. And also we can see it in the Bible, can't we? Over and over and over again, there's damaging family dynamics. So you think about King David, he is described as a man after God's own heart. But before that, he had to be challenged by God through the prophet Nathan, because he had this man Uriah murdered basically so he could marry his wife Bathsheba. And it says that there, you can see in 2 Samuel 12, 9 and 10. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what's evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword and took his wife to be your own. And then it says, now the sword will never depart from your house because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah to be your own. So, in David's family, if you read the Bible, there's those family tensions, sibling rivalry between his children, internal strife, not only his children, his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren and the generations that carried on. Now, hopefully none of you here have done something as drastic as having a man murdered so you could marry his wife. But there are family patterns in our past that are played out in our present, and sometimes we're not necessarily aware of it. I wonder how many of you have ever said, I'm scared to say a family member, why is my mum getting on like that? Or why is my uncle such and such? Or why does my granda say that? And you think, oh, it's just them, it's just that person. But actually, we're all part of a bigger story, aren't we? We're part of a larger family system that goes back generations, and our family history lives in all of us. And whenever I read in Emotionally Healthy Relationships, when the Bible talks about the word family, it actually refers to our extended family back over 3 and 4 generations. So that means your family, if you're talking about it in a biblical perspective, that means your brothers, your sisters, your aunts, your uncles, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-aunts and uncles, significant others in your family going back to the mid-1800s. So maybe we should all get a group discount on Ancestry and try and work some of this stuff out. But God talks about generations in the Bible, and he says it to Moses twice in Exodus. We know the story in Exodus 20 where he gives the 10 Commandments, but he says here later in Exodus 34, verse 6, he passed in front of Moses proclaiming, "The Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to their 3rd and 4th generation." When you read that verse, it sounds really comforting at the start, doesn't it? Oh God, he's slow to anger, he's rich in love, gracious and compassionate. And then you read the next bit. I can imagine you grandparents in the room. What? You're not punishing my grandchildren? It just sounds really harsh, doesn't it? But the Hebrew word for punish means tends to be repeated. So what happens in one generation can often repeat itself again. Both the blessings and the sins of our families have an impact lasting over 3 and 4 generations. And I was a bit perturbed by this, so I thought I need to look this up a bit more. So I looked up the Bible Project, which is a super resource, and it says this: God's heart isn't about punishing people. The verse makes it clear God does not punish children for their parents' sin. God doesn't punish a new generation for the sins of a former generation. But God does hold children who don't learn from their parents' mistakes accountable. It's the responsibility of every generation to not repeat the mistakes of those that came before them. And also don't miss the contrast God makes in these verses. Generational accountability lasts through the 3rd and 4th generation, but God's loyal love lasts for thousands of generations. So God loves us so much. He's slow to anger and he's rich in love. And we've said it so many times in this church, haven't we? We can come as we are, but we don't want to stay as we are. And as followers of Jesus, as we live more like him, as we look at this stuff, which sometimes isn't easy, it brings us more freedom and more joy. And when we become a Christian, the truth is we are adopted and birthed into a new family of God. We can read those verses in John 1:12 and 1 John 3. See what great love the Father has lavished on us that we should be called children of God. That is who we are. Those verses just lift my spirits. We've got a new name, a new identity, a new inheritance. We're empowered by the Spirit. And Paul and I used to say, when we first got married, we've got Jesus genes now. God's DNA is our DNA. We are in God's family. And when all of us together, we're in the new family of God, of brothers and sisters in Christ, not just the ones here in this church, but in other churches and across the world. And we're, that doesn't mean that we just say, oh, I've got a new family now, and we forget about our own family. Of course it doesn't. We don't just wipe out our own family, because there's so many wonderful, wholesome things, hopefully, we've learned from our families. But we're all human, aren't we? And we have to admit we have picked up some negative things too. So part of our discipleship, and this is what we're talking about today, it's putting off the sinful patterns of your family of origin and your culture and learning how to do life in this new family of Jesus. And this really struck me, which I read in Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. Jesus may be in your heart, but Grandpa's in your bones. So I just wonder, like, maybe some of you have heard some of this stuff before. You've thought about it. You've pondered it. Maybe some of you are sitting there going, what is she talking about? You know, but I think sometimes we've been taught that discipleship is just go to church, read your Bible, pray, give a bit, you know, believe all the right things, generally be a good person. But we do believe that discipleship is more than that. And this, what we're talking about in these potentially difficult things, are a big part of it. And you know, there's more freedom for all of us. I just loved it when we were just singing earlier, Jesus Christ, our living hope, hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. And it says that in 2 Corinthians 3, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. And I just love those verses. With unveiled faces, we contemplate the Lord's glory. When we really come before him and allow him to see us as we are, then we get transformed with ever-increasing glory. And there's more freedom for all of us today in this room, and I just want to reassure you of that and encourage you with that. You know, when we first come to faith, we're maybe like babies just drinking milk, but as we grow in faith, we become mature and we become adults who love well. So that's kind of the theory, but how do we do it? What do we do? How do we even start with all this stuff? We come into this family of God. You've all walked into church this morning, and if we're being honest, we all have our brokenness, we all have our wounds. We've been born into this broken world in imperfect families, and if God wants to heal us and bring us freedom, we need to know what from. What do we need freedom from? You know, maybe we need to ask that question, who do you think you are? And that includes honesty, that includes reflecting on our families and where we've come from. And it can be hard work. We've been totally upfront about that. But the more we understand ourselves, our stories, what lies beneath, the more we can get that freedom. And I just think this is an amazing thing, right? Because imagine, like, if you become more free, if you understand yourself better, if you love better, that doesn't just benefit you. That benefits your family. That benefits the people who live in your house. That benefits your friendships. That benefits your school friends, your people in your workplace. It benefits this whole community. Like, imagine that ripple effect. Us being healthy just ripples out that wonderful health and love. And Jesus says, by this everyone will know you're my disciples if you love one another. So I'm going to give you some maybe challenging things to think about right now. And like, this is literally just me putting it out there. And if you're going to take this seriously, you need to think about it yourselves in your own time. So here's some questions we can ask ourselves, and it can be helpful when you're thinking about this yourself to do it through the eyes of yourself as a child, maybe not necessarily even as now. So here's some questions. When you were growing up, what were the relational dynamics like in your family? And here's some of the things it could be. Was it conflicted? Were people always arguing? Did things never get sorted out? Was it a bit cut off? Did people just do the silent treatment and just like give up and stop talking to each other? Some people are smiling already. Was it distant? Did you just have not a really good emotional connection? Did you just not really talk about it? Did it feel a bit interconnected, a mesh? Did you feel under pressure that you all had to think the same? You know, there was a low tolerance for difference or disagreement. Like, this is our family and this is how we do it and this is what we think about it. Or if personal boundaries were crossed in an extremely harmful way, those relational dynamics could be abusive. And we're thinking about relationships going back, not just our own, like further back in our family. Maybe some of you have heard of this before, generational themes. So there could be things that happen in your family that you see repeated over more than one generation. It could be things like addictions, affairs, losses, abuse, divorce, depression, mental health issues, unemployment, physical health issues, family secrets, moving around from one place to another. There's things called earthquake events, which are massive events which create shockwaves in our families. It could be something like premature death, abuse, suicide, war, cancer, business collapse, infidelity, moving from another country. And these things are hard to say. They're hard for me to say this morning. They're hard for me to name. But if we're being honest, some of these things have happened to all of us. You know, because we live in a broken world and our families are not perfect. And these realizations give us insight, and they also help us understand the impact they've had on us today. So you might be thinking about stuff in your family, and a lot of the time, if we're being honest, we're just like, well, that's just my family, that's just the way it is. But how has it actually impacted me? It has. It has impacted each of us in different ways. And I just want to say, like, for some of you, I recognize even me saying some of those words out loud is difficult, and it could be stirring something up in you. And I just want to say, God is here with each one of us, and we want to care for one another well. So make sure, if this is like touching things in you, please talk to someone, please pray. Please don't just leave yourself feeling that way. Now, some of you I know love a good visual. If you wanted to, there's a thing called a genogram, which you probably can't see that very well. I will send it out in a wee email. But if you wanted to plot that in a family tree type way, there's a way you can do it as a genogram, and you can plot those different types of relationship dynamics and events and everything. So that is something that if you want to take this further, if you want to think about it, and it's just an invitation, you can just push it away and not bother if you want to. But if you want to, this is a way to go deeper and think about it. And discipleship is getting Jesus and his way of doing life deep in our bones, and this is a way we can do it. So I still feel like what I'm talking about is very theoretical, so I just want to give you a couple of examples to kind of ground it a wee bit, and I'm going to use someone else's example. So this couple is called Peter and Jerry Scazzaro. They're from New York, and they have done so much work on all of this. Their books are amazing, and I've watched some of their talks. And they have given some very personal examples from their own family, and we're very open and honest. So what are the messages that you've absorbed in your family? So Pete's was something like, you exist to keep everyone else happy. So this message was born out of the family dynamics that existed in his family. So his dad would have travelled a lot for work, and he had to look after his mum, who was a bit vulnerable, and his siblings. So he became really overly responsible in his family. And then that played out in his adult life. When he became a church leader, he then felt overly responsible for everyone. And he didn't do it in a very helpful way. And I want to say that with caution, because I don't want this to, you know, there's a tipping point. I'm not saying, oh, he shouldn't have cared for his mum while his dad was away. You know, he has to be a caring part of his family, but it can become more. It can become part of your identity. It can become a need or an expectation that's put on you, and we always need to ask, is that coming from a healthy place? And another message he absorbed was, it's not okay to make mistakes. So he would have got shouted at for everything he did wrong in his family. Like if he broke a plate, he got in trouble. And so he became a bit of a perfectionist. And then that carried over into how he was with God. So even though he was a pastor and he knew that God loved him and he knew about God's grace, because his message that he'd absorbed, probably without even realizing it, was, you can't mess things up, you can't make mistakes, then he wasn't really living under God's grace. He was perfectionist and trying to live by earning God's love. And then Jerry said she found it hard to find difficult things to say because her family was so positive. They were so good at celebrating. They were so joyful, so much fun. But then she realized, well, actually they were good at that stuff, but they weren't very good at the negative emotions. They weren't good at sadness or anger and things like that. And she tells this story when she was like a little kid, 5 or 6, and she fell off her bike and she was really hurt herself, like her elbow was bleeding, her knee was bleeding, and her dad just said, "You're not hurt, just get up." And she was like going, well, actually I've got blood coming out of my elbow. But because her dad said it, she felt like, oh, I need to do what my dad says. I mustn't be hurt. I must get up. So she was very honest. She said her dad wasn't very good at entering into his own fears and his own hurts, so he couldn't almost allow her to have hers. And then in her family, the mantra was, don't fight. I wonder how many of us have had that in our family, avoid conflict. Let's just not talk about it. And so she was never taught how to, navigate disagreement or differences. And then when she grew up, she brought that into her adult life as well. So she was obviously in the church. If she was annoyed with someone at church, she just avoided them because she didn't know how to have the difficult conversation, and that didn't really go well when she was part of the leaders of the church. And she had to learn a new way of being in God's family. So these are just small examples to show you, small, what seems like things in our family that's just the way it is. But yeah, it makes a difference in how we think and how we act, even as adults and even in our relationships with each other. So what are the stories we're telling ourselves? And here's a few that might strike you, some examples of unbiblical family commandments. Some of these might resonate with you. And these, in our families, we absorb these messages all the time about money, conflict, sex, grief and loss, anger, family relationships, other cultures, success, emotions and feelings. So here's some that I'm just going to share. So the more money you have, the more important you are. Avoid conflict at all costs. Men can be promiscuous, women must be chaste. Sadness is a sign of weakness. Anger is dangerous and bad. Duty to family and culture come before everything. Don't trust people, they will let you down. Don't marry a person of another race or culture. Success is getting married and having children. Your feelings are not important. And maybe when I said some of them, they jarred with you, like they made you angry, like how dare someone say that? Or maybe you read some of them and you're like, gosh, that sounds like something I've learnt in my family. One I really don't like, and I think it's said a lot in Northern Ireland, is don't air your family dirty laundry in public. Which I think, I do understand, like we don't go and blab to everyone who guess what's happened in my family, but you need to have safe places and people to talk about what's difficult. So think about, you can't do this all, guys. You can't think of all of it, but pick one thing and start there. Think about, for example, money in your family. How was money dealt with in your family? Was there a lot of debt or mismanagement of money over generations? Did you absorb a message that money is the best form of security? But what does God say about money? What does the Bible say about money? What's the Jesus way to handle our money? And the beautiful thing is, if we learn and grow these things, we're not passing it on to another generation. We're not teaching our kids these unbiblical family things. We're teaching them, what does Jesus say about these things? Think about how anger was outworked in your family. Was only one person in your family allowed to be angry? Did anger get stuffed down and then burst out in angry outbursts, or was everyone just super sarcastic and mean to each other? Did anger feel dangerous? But how do we deal with anger in this family with Jesus? God says in your anger, do not sin, and he's given us ways to do it well. So how do we learn these godly ways and what's going to be healthier for us? So this is called going backwards to go forwards. So I think maybe your heads might be spinning a bit by now. Maybe you're sitting thinking of, like, this is triggering things of you. Oh, in my family we did this, and I actually don't really like that. Or, or maybe you're sitting here as a parent thinking, oh no, what am I teaching my children? Or, oh no, I really messed that up, didn't I? But I think it's so good to be aware we're all learning, we're all a work in progress, and we need to help and encourage each other. And if it's bringing stuff up, as I said, please talk about it. This I love. Let's focus on this. God wants to take your past and give you a great future out of it. May you trust God to take all the broken parts of your history and create something beautiful with your life that you can offer to the world. How lovely is that? How good is that? We might be sitting here feeling icky and yuck and but God wants to take all those broken pieces and make something so beautiful and so wonderful moving forward. So here's some helpful questions. And when I looked at these questions, I thought, these questions are beautiful, but these questions are also brutal. So I've decided they're brutiful. So these are just a couple of examples of questions you could ask yourself if you want to take this further, if you want to go before the Lord and think about it yourself. How might God be transforming you through the pain and losses of your past? How might a present limit or a past failure actually be God's gift of love to you and a gift that you can give to the world? And what first comes to mind when you think about an unhealthy message that was communicated by silence in your family of origin? And how do you sense Jesus might be inviting you to unlearn that message in order to live a healthier way in God's family? You know, some of you might be sitting feeling a bit uncomfortable. That you might just be thinking, you know, Chantel, my family was actually pretty good. I don't have much to say. I don't have much to complain about. And you might feel like if I start looking at this stuff, I'm going to feel like I'm being really disrespectful and critical and rude towards my family. And I totally understand that. But it's good for us to be honest, and things sometimes happen that were not anyone's fault. Maybe one of those earthquake events I spoke about earlier, but it still affects us. And we were talking about this in our life group during the week, and we just had this really profound moment where Kathy was sharing something from her family story, and I just asked her if she wouldn't mind to come and share it with us all this morning, because I think it's really helpful to help us understand that it's okay to be honest about our family story.
Good morning. Now, my voice is old, okay, and as I've been sitting and getting more and more nervous, it's got croakier and croakier and croakier. So, I'm good, that's great. And now that I've listened to all that Shantz has spoken about this morning, I'm thinking to myself, where have I to start? What does she want me to say? But my mum was born a sighted lady, and when she was 18 she got an infection in her eyes, and by the time she was 22 she was totally blind in both eyes. And I mean totally. And she got married 3 months before she went totally blind. They brought the wedding forward so she could see on her wedding day. And she proceeded on, and she actually lived in a big roof space in her sister's house and shop. It was made into like a bed sitter for them, and my cousin was born at that time, and she practiced on my cousin. So I always tell Elsie, well, I'm only so good because she practiced on you. But then they got their own house, and then I came along, and being the eldest of two, and I've got a fantastic brother who is 6 years younger than me, and he doesn't fail to remind me of that every May. And I suppose bullying starts way back in the years gone by. I think we only think of bullying in the current educational system, but I was certainly bullied about Mummy being blind. I was one particular girl, anytime I met her out in the street, your mummy's blind, isn't she? You know, another girl who stood up in this joint P6-7. I can visualise it, so that's what, you know, what's really impacted you. In this P6-7 needlework class, and the teacher went out. She got up, she said, well, we know if our mummies go blind, who we've got to blame. Now, I knew that was not possible, but it still hurt, because I was different than all of them. And I then continued. I was, I suppose, to a degree, a child carer, although Mummy didn't expect too much. I have to say she was wonderful. But, here we go, defending her. So this is what we're talking about a wee bit on Thursday night, or Tuesday night. And I used to take my brother out, so I was 6 probably when he was tiny, in a big high pram and guide mummy at the same time to go to the shops and things like that. Now, that was my normal, and I know a lot of people looked at it and thought, gosh, I then, when I had a daughter who was 6, I looked at her and I thought, oh my goodness, when I think what I was doing when I was 6, and I wouldn't, probably overdid the protection and not having them to do very much and, all of that, with your own family. But I then began, if there were stories, if people were talking about mummy and saying she was fantastic and inspirational, which she was, I would have said, yeah, she's brilliant. She's an amazing woman. She this, and everybody was going, oh, I know she's amazing, and I've heard so many people talk about her, and she's spoken at so many churches, and she's wonderful. And I said, yes, she is wonderful. And that was the mantra, I suppose, that I grew up with. Yes, she is wonderful. She is inspirational. She is fantastic. I am blessed to have my mummy, and I was. And I still miss her today after 3 years. But I was blessed to have my mummy. And then I sort of realised one day in a church service, actually up in Belfast, I started to feel a bit sad about the things that mummy had missed. And I didn't ever want anybody to know that I felt this sadness, because I thought that was disrespectful to her. And I felt sad that she had never seen myself and my brother. I felt sad that she had never seen me in my nurse's uniform and me in my bride's dress, and that she never saw our children. And it was really I became very emotional, and I thought, this is wrong. God, you need to take this from me. I cannot think like this. And it was very much God saying, no, it's okay that you don't feel okay about that. It's okay that you feel sad that you missed out on those occasions. It's okay. So just, and even loads of years later, and quite a number of years ago, I have had therapy. And I did the whole thing when we were talking about mummy, of defending her and standing up for her, and yes, and this and that. And there were things in the house that weren't fantastic at times, like in everybody's house. So, but I just, oh no, she was wonderful. She was wonderful. She did her best. And the therapist has said to me on numerous occasions, look back to the wee girl. Look back to what the wee girl didn't get, what she missed out on her mummy not seeing her. Look back to the teenager. Look back to the nurse. Look back to the bride. Look back to the mummy, and realise that it is okay that you are sad that your mummy missed those things. And it didn't make her a bad person, but you're okay. So if anybody has got things in their past with their family, or things that they've felt about their own parents, none of us are, if I brought our 4 tripping in there, they could give you a few good stories. I'm certainly far from perfect. None of us are perfect. None of us are perfect. And just realise in your own heart that it's okay that you realise your parents weren't imperfect. It's okay to think, actually, that was not good. That was not good for me. But that's who they were. And they were doing the best they could with what they had.
Thank you. Give her a round of applause. That's brave for Kathy to share that part of her story. And in Life Group, we had a bit of a mic drop moment, because Kathy shared that, and then Caitlin said, it's okay for it to be both and. It's okay to be like, Nessa was amazing. She coped so well with her blindness. She was a beautiful mum, but it's okay, and as well to say, but Kathy missed out on things, or things were hard because of that same blindness. So it's both and, isn't it? And every family has their broken parts. And just to finish off, the people of Israel, God's family, were broken. And we read in Exodus 14, we know that story. God used Moses to part the Red Sea so that they could escape Pharaoh and the Egyptian army. And the Israelite people had been living in Egypt for 40 years. They were slaves. That culture had become part of their culture. They had to probably do things they didn't want to do just to survive. They had to lie and steal. They had to disrespect Sabbath and work 7 days a week. They couldn't live how they wanted. And Peter Scazzero puts it like this: God delivered them out of Egypt by grace, but Egypt was still deep inside of them. So even though he parted the sea and they walked through and they got away from those Egyptian slave drivers, that just didn't disappear. That part of their story didn't disappear. And they would trust God straight after. You know, they were in awe when Moses did that. They were in awe when he parted the Red Sea. And it says the people feared the Lord and they put their trust in him and Moses. But 2 chapters later, they're in the desert. There's not much food. They're really hungry. It's the 15th day of the 2nd month after they've come out of Egypt. And it says the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. And they said, if only we'd just died in Egypt. You know, we had all the food we wanted there, didn't we? And now you've brought us into this desert to starve to death. So, like, they've had this amazing, miraculous experience. They've gone through the Red Sea, and less than 2 months later, they're like, oh, we should have just died there. We've got no food. You know, I just wonder if we're like that. Sometimes we're freed by grace. We're part of this new family, but we're still living as we did back in the day. We're still living as if Egypt's in our bones. You know, it's okay to trust and love and go, yeah, God, you're amazing when things are going well. But when things are going badly, do we fall back into our old ways? Do we just do the things our families did? All those kind of things we've talked about. And we just, you know, God knew that. Like, he didn't just leave them there. He gave them everything they needed. He gave them manna. He gave them the 10 commandments to show them how to live. And he gives that to us too. He gives us the Bible. He gives us all these wise people around us to show us how we can live. And they were freed by grace, but they still had to learn to live in these new ways. And that's us. We're freed by grace, but we're still on a journey. We're still learning how to live as God intended. And we need to be honest about ourselves and our families and who we are and where we've come from. So just right now where you're sitting, what is the story you're telling yourself? Because I know we all have this tendency to go negative, don't we? We all have this tendency to think, oh, I've really messed this up, or oh, my family, or oh, I don't even know where to start, or, oh, you know, maybe your mind's running over like that. But there's hope and love and freedom and grace in this room because of Jesus. And I just want to say, may you trust God to take all the broken parts of your history and create something beautiful with your life that you can offer to the world. When I saw this picture, I thought of the song we sing in church, "You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I can stand and sing. I am a child of God." God has brought us freedom. God has freed us from slavery. God has led us out to a promised land. But we don't get there and stand still. We keep walking and we trust him because he is here for us and he wants to take our fears and our weakness and our brokenness and make it into something beautiful.
Thanks for listening to the Carrickfergus Vineyard podcast. If you'd like to find out more about our church, please visit our website, carrickfergusvineyard.org.